But it is. The Browns are on to 2026. We'll talk about it coming up next on the Locked On Browns podcast.
You are Locked On Browns, your daily Cleveland Browns podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, Dog Pound? I'm Spencer German, your host of the Locked On Browns podcast, and proudly covering your Cleveland Browns each and every single day in the land and on the road. A little sleep deprived, but happy to be here with you for the latest episode of Locked On Browns. Browns are in rebuilding mode, which is why last night's trade made a ton of sense. Don't expect the Browns to take a quarterback in the second round today, and get ready for another trade back tonight? I think so. I do want to thank you for being an everydayer with the Locked On Browns podcast, making us your first listen every single day. And remember, you can find Cleveland Browns content with Locked On Browns every week, Monday through Friday, guaranteed, with bonus content on some weekends as well. And it's totally free to you. All you got to do is hit that subscribe button wherever it is that you listen to your podcast. And of course, at the Locked On Browns YouTube channel, where you can also get involved in the show by chiming in on anything we discuss today in the comments section. This is your team, so be part of the conversation every single day. And today's show is brought to you by our friends at LinkedIn. LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the qualified candidates you want to talk to faster. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL. Terms and conditions may apply. So yes, I want to be clear here. And I talked about this a little bit in my reaction episode on Thursday night, late Thursday night. The Browns are in rebuild mode. We know that about this team. And so until they have a quarterback, that will be the case, which is why last night transpired the way it did and why it made sense that things transpired the way that it did. I understand where people were getting excited about the idea of this electrifying two-way player in Travis Hunter and what he brings to the table and him as a receiver. And there was so much talk in recent weeks about how he could be a standout wideout. And that's exactly what the Browns need. They have a hole to fill at the wide receiver position, and getting the ball in his hands and allowing him to just go to work and make plays and score touchdowns for a team that couldn't score a lot of points last year was enticing. It was exciting. It was, salivating at the mouth type stuff. And then when push comes to shove, they trade back, not to take an offensive player, but to ultimately take a defensive tackle. And you lose sight of, the caliber of the player they got because you're sort of shell shocked by it all. It's surprising. It felt like for weeks it'd been etched in stone that the pick was going to be Travis Hunter, and you're caught off guard by it. And I think this is where the draft is both fun and misleading, because I think the draft this time of year sometimes convinces you that your team is in a certain spot or in a better spot than they really are, or in a position to do something that's going to turn things around quicker. And I'm not trying to say like fans are totally disillusioned here. Like, I think people still understood there was a lot of holes this team needed to fill, and they probably weren't going to be amazing next year. And so the idea of Travis Hunter was exciting because it was like, hey, you get the star player that you can have as a cornerstone moving forward for years to come. But the idea of Travis Hunter was great, yes, but also it was maybe a little. It was a move that, like, clearly the Jaguars, for example, traded up for Travis Hunter because they believe that they had a player like that it's going to help them immensely take that next step in terms of, like, they're in a position to be competitive. They have a franchise quarterback, they believe. So they're in different situations in the Browns entirely. And so for Cleveland, it's a realization of, listen, Travis Hunter would be great, but that's the type of player you add when you feel like you're close to really contending in their perspective. And we are better off trading back, getting a bunch of picks to try to turn this roster over with multiple top flight players this year and next year. And you add the second rounder today, that gives you a chance to add 2 second rounders, 2 third round picks, and really, like, just throw more darts at the board and have the potential to hit on more guys that could be starters for you pretty quickly here and contribute pretty quickly here. And so both in the next 2 years, you're going to get a chance to turn this roster over. Barry, at least if you assuming he's here next year, is going to get a chance to turn this roster over fast. And the possibilities of that outweighed like getting a maybe immediately impactful player like Travis Hunter, who, yeah, like he could be a cornerstone guy, but it maybe it just wasn't the right situation right now because of where the Browns are at. Like they need to inject this roster with talent, and they set themselves up to do that both the rest of this weekend and next year. And in the meantime, what that means for 2025 is that, yes, it's probably going to be another frustrating season in terms of wins and losses. They're probably not going to be some playoff contending team. Now, I think the Vegas total on wins for the Browns is like 4.5, something around there. And they still have some talent to add here in the second and third round that likely impacts that mark, right? Like impacts how competitive they can really be if they add a wide receiver early, or they add a quarterback that could be a guy, or they add a running back that can headline this running back room like they really need. So there's still ways that they can infuse this roster and build up this roster around a potential franchise quarterback that maybe fluctuates that slightly, that win total. So I do think, like, as I look at it right now, the Browns are in a situation where they could really stink and be back in the top of the draft next year. Or they could be like average, like they could get to 7 wins maybe, or 8 wins maybe. And, they gave themselves options with that second first rounder they had from Jacksonville to potentially trade back up and get a franchise quarterback. But that's the biggest thing that I take away from Thursday night, is that they have their sights set on 2026 to really identify a quarterback of the future, a franchise quarterback. Because now, like, they have the flexibility now to do what they need to do to either get that quarterback to supplement the roster with more starting or supplement the roster with more starting players if they somehow manage to find a quarterback this year. So let's say they take Shedeur Sanders or Jalen Milroe right out of the gate here at 33 tonight, which we'll get into why I don't think that's going to happen coming up. But if they were to hit on that player, then all of a sudden, yeah, even if that comes to fruition, you still have 2 first-round picks that you can use to add other talent around him and around that quarterback. But if not, you're positioned to go get that quarterback next year that you really think is the guy. And I think it is the latter feels like it's more of what the reality of the situation is here. This quarterback class was talked about ad nauseum throughout this pre-draft process as not being a very good class. Nobody wanted to have a repeat of 2022 where anybody felt like they were overdrafted or Kenny Pickett goes in the first round, doesn't pan out. And so teams waited, and the Giants traded up late to get Jackson Dart. He was the only other quarterback to go in the first round. Obviously, Cam Moore went with number 1 overall, which made some sense. But nobody else wanted to really pull the trigger. It's a down year at the position. And so that's not to say they won't take a chance on one at some point. But they're setting themselves up to make that big move next year and draft that quarterback next year. And so in the meantime, that does sort of mean that 2025 is sort of going to be a punted season. Again, I'm not saying they're going to go out and not be competitive. I'm not saying that they're not going to go out and try to win games, or that Andrew Berry is – I hate using the word tanky, because being around those guys in the locker room, like, nobody comes to a team. Nobody shows up to all the offseason program and they're going to sit there and be like, yeah, I'm just going to hope to make it through the season because we're tanking. Like, these guys, they work too hard. They take too much pride in their craft to have that be the case in terms of how they view things. And so I hate using that word. I think it's maybe a fair way to, as from a fan perspective, it could be a fair way to look at it, is that they are sort of tanking for a quarterback next year. And I understand where that phrase comes from, but I look at it more as they're going to try to sort of piece this together the best they can this year to be as competitive as they can. But they realize where they're at. And that's the most important thing to come out of all of this. The comments from Jimmy Haslam a couple weeks ago, I think, really set the stage for what transpired last night, what's going to transpire throughout the rest of draft weekend. Until they have this quarterback position figured out, they know where they are. They are a rebuilding team. So don't get that twisted. It was a smart move last night, all things considered, because of the reality that this team is currently living in. And the fact that they have a roster that has a lot of holes to fill, chief among them, the quarterback position. And until they figure that position out, they're not going to really be in the mix for Super Bowls and playoffs and all those different things. So they're going to try to make it work this year. It's probably going to be ugly. You can say if you want that they're tanking. I won't call it that, but they are on to 2026 in terms of finding that quarterback and essentially identifying the guy that they think can save the franchise in that way, or in some respects, save Andrew Berry and Kevin Stefanski's job. I think there is a sidebar conversation to be had about what this means for the future of those two, which is a conversation, by the way, we had during the offseason at one point. I don't want to do that today per se, because there's still so much that has to transpire here on draft weekend. But for all intents and purposes, the Browns are on to 2026 when it comes to truly putting themselves in a place to compete at the highest level and chase the main goal of, hey, let's get to the playoffs, let's win Super Bowls. And so you might be signing up here to participate and cheer for another losing season, but it's nowhere you haven't been before, Browns fans, because you've seen this franchise through the doldrums of 1-31 over two straight seasons. And they're at least in a somewhat better place than they were back then, because they do have talent on this roster. And because of the trade last night, they have a chance to add even more of it over the next 2 years to fill this thing out before they add that quarterback into the mix. So along the lines of the quarterback position, they are going to take one at some point. They have to. They have to field a team. They have to field an offense in some capacity. And that quarterback room is still pretty empty, all things considered. But I'm not expecting them to draft one with either of the second round picks that they have pretty early on night 2. We'll talk about it coming up next on the Locked On Browns podcast. As a small business owner, your work doesn't end when the clock hits 5. Your business is always on your mind, which means when it's time to hire, you need a partner that works just as hard as you do. That's where LinkedIn Jobs comes in. When you clock out, LinkedIn clocks in. LinkedIn makes it easy to post your job for free, share it with your network, and get qualified candidates all in one place. Post Your Job is LinkedIn's new feature that can help you write job descriptions and then quickly get your job in front of the right people with deep candidate insights. And here's a pro tip. Use the hashtag hiring frame on your profile picture to double your reach to qualified candidates. It's no wonder 72% of small businesses say LinkedIn helped them find high quality hires. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedonnfl. That's linkedin.com/lockedonnfl to post your job absolutely free. Terms and conditions apply. Today's episode is brought to you by our friends at Epicor. Every team knows the value of hard work in taking pride in what you're building and practicing every detail to get the best results. But no one player, no matter how amazing, can do it all alone. Working together makes getting the win easier. At Epicor, the all-stars are the hardworking manufacturers and distributors who create and deliver the things we all need, from aerospace to electrical to medical devices. Epicor ERP solutions are created by industry experts to help make every day easier. Seeing your whole supply chain is easier. Managing logistics is easier. Responding to price changes also easier. From small businesses with big dreams to growing enterprises with a global vision, we'll equip you with the right tools to move forward, think ahead, and lead the way. Because as the clock ticks down, you need to make the most of every hardworking minute. Easier doesn't cut corners. Easier finds the lane. Discover your success with www.easierwithepicor.com. That's www.easierwithepicor.com. All right, so as I said, the Browns are on to 2026. They got their sights set on one of those quarterbacks next year that in what should be a better class. A lot can change, we know, between now and then. Andrew Berry even said that as recently as a week ago. But with that in mind, they are going to take a quarterback in this class. This room right now consists of Joe Flacco and Kenny Pickett. Like, there's no denying they will add somebody who's going to be a project, somebody that's going to, that they're going to have to they're going to look to develop in some capacity and see what they can bring to the table in year one. And maybe they get lucky and they find the quarterback of the future in the second or third round. Who knows? But I'm going into Friday night now. All these days are blurring together, expecting that the Browns will not take a quarterback, not only at 33, but with either of these first two picks in the second round. And the reason I feel this way is, like, if you had taken Travis Hunter at 2, you can make the case that, okay, you added this offensive weapon. Now go get him a guy that can maybe throw in the football. Like Shedeur Sanders is there, right? Like if you had added him, then you get Shedeur Sanders maybe at 33, and it's like you keep these guys together that played together at Colorado. Or even if you added Milroe, it's like, okay, project quarterback, but he comes in at the same time. He's got this shiny new toy that he gets to throw to, and they get to sort of come up together through the organization. It's how you'd want to set a situation like that up. But because they traded back and took a defensive tackle of all things, which, by the way, I said this on Thursday night, defensive line was a need at some point. It was either via the edge or via the interior. They needed to add to that group because it was something that they were lacking at. So, that's another reason why I don't think it was a bad move. It just was shocking because nobody saw them taking defensive tackle, and it sort of came out of nowhere that way, that was the player that they settled on. So I get all those things, but defensive tackle was a need. But because they now haven't addressed any of their offensive questions, which is, I think the biggest gripe people have with the move on Thursday, you're not going to start off day 2 by taking a quarterback who may not even be your quarterback next year because, you positioned yourself now to take one in 2026. And that's the key point I keep going back to. Like, with so many offensive needs that this team has, why would the first offensive player you take, again, different if you take Travis Hunter too, because then you're adding something else. But why would the first offensive player that this team takes in this draft be a quarterback who is A, going to be a project anyway, and B, might not even be part of the equation next year in terms of like starting or competing? Because if you find the guy that you really want, like Garrett Nussmeier, Arch Manning, we know, by the way, that's going to be a conversation for the whole next year, is Jimmy Haslam's affinity for the Mannings, being a Tennessee guy. And like, was this all to get Arch Manning next year? Who knows? But we'll save that for another time. Regardless though, like if they feel there's a better quarterback coming next year, and that's they have their sights set on finding their franchise guy a year from now, why would their first pick in this year's draft, with so many other offensive needs to fill, be a quarterback that may or may not be starting for you even in a year from now? Like, that just doesn't make sense. I understand that GMs don't always think that way. Like, they're not going to pass on a guy that they might like and they see some potential for, especially at that position, if they believe the value's there. And so maybe they think Shedeur is great still as in the value, or at this point in the draft. Like, he's the value's there to take him at 2 or at 33 in the second round, and try to see what he brings to the table, and that they think they could find their franchise quarterback that way. That could be the case. I just don't think it makes much sense when you have more pressing. Quarterback's always the most pressing need, but given what's the understanding of what this class is, like, I like other options better. There are players available here that I think make a lot more sense, and we'll talk about those coming up, than just taking a quarterback in a down year at that position specifically. Like, that just doesn't add up to me. If the goal is, hey, let's see where we're at next year, they're still going to take one. That's not what I'm trying to say. But this feels very much like it's setting up for the Browns will wait on quarterback and try to get somebody like Tyler Shuck in the late 3rd round or maybe the 4th round, which they still have a 4th rounder after the trade with Jacksonville. They swapped 4th rounders. Jacksonville got 104 from them. They get 126, I believe it is, off the top of my head. So they moved back a little bit in the 4th round. They also got the 5th rounder from the Texans because they paired a bunch of their late picks this year, 2 of their 6th and a 7th, to move up into the 5th round. And they got a future 5th as well in 2027. So they added some of this other draft capital, made some moves around the board where they're going to be drafting a little bit earlier on day 3 in some respects, but also a little bit later in day 3 in some respects. But they added a second rounder this year, so they have a chance on Friday to add 4 guys in the 2nd and 3rd rounds combined to again fill out this roster with players that could have an immediate impact on the results for the Browns. That's massive. And because of that, and understanding that they still need now, after addressing defensive line with Mason Graham, they still need offensive line help. They still need wide receiver because you didn't take Travis Hunter. You still need running back. You still need tight end. All those things could be in play with these next rounds of picks. And so in a down year for quarterbacks, it sort of makes sense to wait and try to get his Tyler Shuck, maybe even a Will Howard later on if you so choose, or see if Jalen. And listen, if Jalen Milroe somewhere, or even if Shador were to fall further, yeah, maybe you pull the trigger like late second round and you trade back in, or if he fell to 67, God forbid, you take him there. Same thing with Milroe. If Milroe is available at 67, that could very much be the pick. That's where the Browns are slated to make their first pick in the third round. So I'm not saying they won't take quarterback in this next series of picks. I just don't think it's going to be with either of these second rounders because of how high up they're drafting in the second round. 33 in particular, I like feels like it's a spot where you're taking a like there's so many names still there that it makes sense. And then 36 a couple picks later. And by the way, they might not even make a pick at 33, which I'm going to get into coming up next as well. But yeah, I'm not anticipating that Thursday night starts with this great bang of the Browns taking a quarterback because of the move they made last night. It signals to me that if 2026 is the year to identify a quarterback, why would your first offensive pick in this class with so many holes that you need to address on that side of the ball be a quarterback that may or may not pan out and a year from now may, not even have a shot at earning that job because you think you found the actual franchise quarterback? It doesn't add up to me. I'm not anticipating that. You shouldn't either. And we'll see instead what the Browns decide to do with that pick, which, by the way, one of the things they could do with it, trade back again. Maybe you don't want to hear that, but it's true. We'll talk about the possibilities here with pick 33 coming up next on the Locked On Browns podcast. The NBA playoffs are officially here, and FanDuel is giving new customers an incredible way to get in on the action. Right now, when you join FanDuel and you place your first $5 bet, you'll get $250 in bonus bets if your first bet wins. I love FanDuel because it makes betting so easy, whether it's picking my favorite team to win, that would be the Cleveland Cavaliers, who are in the midst of a playoff run of their own, or diving into player props. They have great ways to get in on the action during the game, before the game, after the game, as you're getting ready for multiple games going on at the same time or around the same time. After the game tips off, you can even combine your live prop bets into same game parlays for a chance to win even more money. It's the best opportunity to get involved and participate in the NBA playoffs from the comfort of your own home or wherever you might be. So don't miss out. Head to FanDuel.com. Claim your $250 in bonus bets today if your first $5 bet wins. That's FanDuel.com. All right, so the Browns traded back in night one and shocked everybody, sent some fireworks into the NFL draft night there in Green Bay. I'm anticipating we get a similar situation here to start off night two. I think the Browns are honestly poised to trade back from 33 again. Andrew Barry's talked about it. That 33rd pick is highly coveted going into day two because there's always players. It's interesting. Like there was a conversation with Stefanski had where he sort of discussed this idea that like at a certain everyone's board is different once you get to like a certain point. Like and like every team's board just looks vastly different in terms of how they value certain players. And so I think what's interesting about that concept is, or that idea here is, like if there are teams like it's why like Shamar Stewart goes to the Bengals as early as he did. Like they clearly valued him over a bunch of other guys at that spot that maybe other teams would have thought he was a late first round guy. And so there's always players that didn't go in the first round that the value is massively high on, that teams are willing to get up and try to get at 33, the first pick of the first day, to make sure they maximize that talent and that other teams don't jump up and get them or somebody else doesn't take them. There are some names at the top of this board right now spilling into day two that are still high profile. Will Johnson being one of them out of Michigan. Like he's got this knee injury that I guess is hurting his stock and why he's tumbling. People are concerned it could be a chronic thing. And because of that, he's now available to start day two. Maybe this is the place where it makes sense to take him. Similarly, Mike Green, right? Defensive end out of Marshall, who I actually really like his game, and I thought he could be a fit for the Browns if he was going to tumble to here, but that's back in a different world where I thought the Browns are going to be taking Travis Hunter and they still could use some pass rush help. But those are two guys who are there. Obviously, Shador, as I mentioned, is there. Jalen Milroe, some of the quarterbacks that are still here and in play at this point, coming to focus here too. And that's the other thing. If there's a team that really still that is eyeing a quarterback, the New Orleans Saints, for example, they need a quarterback and understanding, especially with the Derek Carr situation, what things look like for them. If they want a quarterback, they might be inclined to trade up to 33 to get that pick. So it's because of the guys that slipped through out of the first round that teams still have first round grades on that makes that pick so valuable, on top of the fact that like teams will always reach on quarterbacks. And if you can start the round by grabbing one before anybody else has a chance to, that's, that helps your cause. That's a a way to sort of guarantee yourself you get the guy you're looking at or the guy that you want on day two. So there all those things come into focus here. And it's why I do think the Browns are going to once again, I'm going into tonight feeling like it's like 80-20 they trade out. 80% they trade back, 20% they stay put and take somebody. Yes, there are some players there. We're going to talk about who that I think make a ton of sense for the Browns, but I also think the value of moving back, maybe collecting another third rounder like tonight, and maybe a future second rounder, like those things are immensely valuable to this Browns team that, again, is positioning themselves well to move up the draft board next year for a quarterback, or just straight up load up on a bunch of different positions and players this year and next year to fix this roster. So I think that's going to be too enticing for Andrew Berry to pass up. If he didn't pass up on it last night with 2, why would he pass up on it tonight with a chance to add more picks to the arsenal here? And that's the biggest thing. Andrew Berry said it himself, like maximizing the number 2 overall pick was his main goal with trading back. He felt like he did that. I tend to agree. I think he did maximize the value of that number 2 overall pick. I think he's thinking the same thing here. There's a way to maximize what you get for this pick. And sometimes it is just taking a player, but in this instance, I do think it's collecting a bunch of draft capital. And the reason Barry can consider something like this too is because they draft 3 picks later at 36. If they have like 5 guys that they're like, hey, we like this set of guys here at 33, one of them is going to be available, at least multiple of them are going to be available at least a couple picks later at 36. And so you still sort of walk into or step into a situation where you're getting a guy that you like just a couple picks later, and you got more draft capital out of it. So I think that sets the stage for them to trade back again. Be ready for it. And in terms of guys that I like, whether they stay put or not, listen, Luther Burden at this point, without taking Travis Hunter, makes way too much sense for this team. And I listen, he would be awesome if they added him to this roster to be a sort of that second guy to Jerry Jeudy. And man, could he do some special things? It'd be awesome if they could get him. I don't know if like they'd have to take him at 33 to get that done, or if they could wait till 36 and try to get him. But Burden comes to mind. He's probably, aside from Hunter, if he's going to play receiver, he's probably my favorite receiver in this draft because I like him more than Tet, to be honest with you. So, like, yeah, I like Emeka Egbuka too. I would have been fine with him, but obviously he went early, 19 of the Bucks. But Burden is there. I love him as a potential guy that could take at 33 or wait on and see if he's there at 36. But that could be somebody that teams are trading up to get as well. Then I think you start coming into focus, and especially if they trade back and get a different second rounder to go with pick 36 that they got from the Jaguars. Then I start thinking about like, okay, Travion Henderson, Quinshon Judkins, my guy, who I've been talking about this entire draft process. Love him coming out of Ohio State. Physical runner, reminds me of Kareem Hunt. I would love him on this roster, and he's in play now for the Browns in the second round. Caleb Johnson out of Iowa, guy who ran a lot of outside zone stuff, same that Kevin Stefanski does at Iowa. He comes into focus. And I will say this, some of these tight ends, Mason Taylor out of LSU, like there are a number of options and players here that I think come into focus here for the Browns in these next couple picks that they have, and with the collection of picks that they have here going into day 2, they're going to have a chance to still add high profile players and talented players to this team pretty quickly here and in short order. and get impactful players, even though it's second and third round picks. Now, the one position I will say I think I'd wait on at this point is probably offensive tackle. That's not to say I don't like I like the kid out of Minnesota, but the top guys are gone. Will Campbell gone, Armand Membu gone, Kelvin Banks gone, Josh Simmons gone, Josh Connerly Jr. gone. So like the guys that I think you would have really been targeting are all sort of off the board here. I think you can probably wait and get more value on a guy offensive line wise, offensive tackle wise, rather, in the third round. It is a somewhat deeper group. So I think at this point, with those guys off the table, I think you do wait on that position, but we'll see. Maybe the Browns have a guy graded differently than what I'm sort of forecasting, and they would potentially pull the trigger here in the second round. But I think the skill positions is what it's all about in this second round and third round. But it'll come after they trade back from 33, because I'm basically just anticipating that's going to happen to kick off night 2. And it would be sort of fun to see the Browns start off both the first 2 nights of the draft by being the team that steals headlines with 2 massive trades down in respectfully. That's another episode in the books, Dog Pound. Thank you for joining me as always to talk about your favorite football team. Obviously, a lot more to come. I'll connect with you at some point during the second round after both picks are made, after one pick is made, after a pick is made, and then a second pick is made. So stay tuned for some shorts and instant reaction to those. I'll have a mini podcast episode for you as well on how this all kind of plays out tonight. We'll do it after the second round picks. We'll do it after the third round picks. And then we'll have a whole nother show that'll drop Saturday morning as well to just kind of talk through everything that transpired on night 2 of the draft. So hit that subscribe button. Make Locked On Browns your first listen every day. And for your second listen, head on over to check out the Locked On NFL Draft show throughout this night too. Or you can keep it local. Check out Locked On Cavs, Locked On Guardians. Thank you for being an everydayer at the Locked On Podcast Network. I will talk to you again real soon, Cleveland. See you.